Just a very short observation, which you can comment on. Glad to see that the English exceptionalism that delivered Brexit is still alive and well in the Home Office.
Yeah, Peter, I'm sorry to tell you, it ain't going nowhere.
No, no, it isn't going anywhere, is it? No.
But I mean,
Um,
I'm glad to see it's not just me. I mean, I think it's quite. It's just the attitude smacks of arrogance. It's like what how would the UK travelers or officials feel if, you know, some country in the middle of Asia turned around and said, "Well, you know what, we've got a digital only system now. 4 weeks notice." I think people would be quite up in arms.
do you consider, actually, there is a question there. You've obviously have a lot of dealings with the Home Office, but probably other departments. Do you consider this is a uniquely special place in hell in government, the Home Office, or is it widespread?
Um, DWP's no better.
Oh, yes, of course, I would know that.
Department
Yeah.
of Leveling Up, Housing and Communities is no better. So the more I come into, I mean, look, I spent 25 years working as a private tutor, happily tutoring little kids, teaching them languages and maths and English. I had no contact with the advice sector um, or with any government departments. It's only because of Brexit that my life has completely changed. And
So,
over the last, where are we now? 2025. So what, 6 years since I entered the advice sector, I've started coming in contact with more and more government departments. And I know British bureaucracy has always peculiar case or a special case. I'm trying not to say special, but it's true. It is a bit special in that, like, German bureaucracy functions. It's convoluted, it's complex, but it functions. If you find yourself in front of a public servant, they will tell you the steps you need to undertake. And that's pretty much the same in my experience all across the EU. It might be long-winded, it might be convoluted, but there is a pathway that you can follow and get to the destination that you want to reach. In my experience of 36 years in the UK, there is no such pathway in the UK. The only way to get to where you want to be is by ignoring the rules and what they are supposed to be, and somehow bending or breaking them. Of
so,
course,
Elon Musk is absolutely wrong when he says that we should get rid of 75% of the civil servants. He does not know what he faces, does he?
I mean, I don't know if anything I would want to say about Elon Musk is fit for recording. So I missed that particular pearl from his utterances. But I've heard a lot of rubbish from him
So,
recently.
so,
It's like,
so
I'm sorry, mate, you
finally,
haven't got a clue.
to put some words into your mouth, which you can disagree with, of course, but I think you'll agree with them. All that money that was wasted through the last 30 years of my life on customer focused training in public services has probably been evaluating. It's probably been an utter waste of time.
Actually, no, I see why you say that, but
Yeah.
actually there are let me go back to something I've been saying since I started working on the EU settlement scheme. In the Home Office, there are two types of wolves, and you have to decide which one you feed. Do you know that analogy?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. There are people who work in the Home Office who just want to do a half decent job with the rules and parameters that they were given. And um, they're not bad people. There are also some really mendacious people. And you have a choice who you want to engage with. And there
Mm.
are, like I say, there are some good guys. So when these good guys ask me for feedback of what's going well, I will give them feedback, and it will be honest and it will be constructive. And they have, for example, the vulnerabilities team, they have taken things on board that we have told them, whether that
So,
came from in limbo
like
or from the 3 million or from other grant funded organizations. They are not entirely deaf. Um, Hard of hearing, yes, but not completely deaf.
So your best advice is, like everything in life, if you find the right person, if you find the wrong person, phone again. until
Yes,
you
oh,
find the right one.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. If you find the wrong person, just call again until you get to one who not necessarily tells you what you want to hear, but who will engage with what you're actually asking them
yeah.
and kind of find you the way to navigate through the system. But
Okay.
again, with the EU settlements, before the EU settlement scheme, there was no phone number. There was no way of contacting anybody in the Home Office to ask, when you say about customer service, there was none, did not exist. So since and the Home Office brags a lot about how the Settlement Resolution Centre is sort of the jewel in the crown for the EU settlement scheme, because that was an integral part of that particular scheme. And likewise, they did with the Windrush scheme as well. There's also a dedicated task force. And again, with the Windrush scheme, you do not get an automated system. A person, a human being picks up straight away. So there are bits in the Home Office where customer service is actually a thing and where they do actually try. To what extent they succeed is maybe written on another page, but they do exist. So yeah.
Is digital exclusion a concept recognized in law? Can it be challenged legally?
Do you know what? That's a really good question. You're good at those. I'm not aware of any law that recognizes digital exclusion. There are all sorts of public sector duties, not to discriminate, that typically, of course, refer to protected characteristics under the Equalities Act, which, I mean, hopefully care experience will be added to that. It could be argued that older people by definition are not as likely to be as digitally literate. Yeah, so I'm not aware of any like actual legislation that says you must not digitally exclude. But there are cases to be made that digital exclusion should be seen as a form of discrimination. And then, of course, you do have a whole raft of legislation available. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, no, I was just curious. Given the way
Yeah.
English law works, maybe that's waiting on a court ruling of some kind.
Well, and I mean, I could have said a lot more about strategic litigation that's been undertaken on behalf of EU citizens of various court decisions. I mean, the fact that I don't know how much you know about pre-settled and settled status. I swerved that whole can of worms. But there was a court ruling that basically said the design of the system of giving people an expiry date of pre-settled status was a violation of the withdrawal agreement, because my rights and everybody's rights under the withdrawal agreement are for life. They cannot expire. So even if at the time of the end of the transition period, you were not in the UK for long enough to qualify for settled status and you only got pre-settled status, that pre-settled status shouldn't expire. The only problem is that, depending on what happens in your life, you might not be able to accrue the 5 years qualifying residence for full settled status. So now the Home Office workaround to this is to extend pre-settled status by 5 years.
Right.
Because they just can't cope with something not having an expiry date. It just, it's a round peg, square hole kind of, or is it the other way around? Square peg, round hole kind of scenario. And then, of course, there was the court decision that said that EU citizens with pre-settled status can still rely on the European Charter of Fundamental Rights, which means that if they are facing destitution, they should not be denied benefits. So there were thousands of EU citizens with pre-settled status that were basically told, no, you can't get universal credit unless you're working because you don't meet the right to reside requirements. And if they're facing destitution, then yes, they can. So yeah, this may, and then the IMA, the Independent Monitoring Authority, has taken the Home Office to court on a number of occasions and secured quite a few wins. So this might well be one to point to the IMA